Hello everyone and welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Vivek and I have been teaching you web development, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, React, Node.js and many more. In our previous video we learned about HTML layout and we know how to group things together. We learn about HTML semantics as well in our previous video. So this video is quite different. In this video we're going to learn about positioning the element and how can we position elements in our web in our HTML and CSS, right? So let's get started. I'll open my Visual Studio Code. Here I will create index.html file. I'll just say index.html and I will also create an style.css file. So this is style.css right here. So I will link my HTML and CSS. Okay, so not in my CSS file, in my index.html file. Let's get all of this. And here I will link my CSS to my HTML. So link tab and I will link my style.css here like this. Okay, so now my CSS and HTML has been linked. Let's try it. HTML, I will say position in web. In our style.css, I will just give it a background color just to test it out. Let's say red. Now of course I have to copy the path of the file. I'll just say copy path and go out here, paste it, and if you can see here we get our HTML, CSS and everything. It's running at least perfectly fine up until now, right? Now if I go to my VS Code now, and so first of all there are three ways we can position element in our web, right? So first is static, which means just the default behavior of any element, and second is absolute. So absolute is how we can position it relative to the parents. Another is fixed and another is sticky. Let's try it out one by one. First of all let me create something in our HTML file. I will create a div and I will give it a class called container like this. Inside the container I'm going to create another div. I'm going to create another div and give it a class called child, right? And inside child I will say hello, just for now, just for testing purpose. And in my CSS file I'm going to give it a style. So I'll just say container will have height of 600 pixel and it will contain the width of also 600 pixel like this. I will give it a background color. Background color will be black. Now if I go and refresh the file, you can see here I have my container and everything is working perfectly fine. Another thing that I'm going to do is bring this container right in the middle of my web page, right? And for that I will go to my CSS and inside my body tag, at least for now, okay, I will just say body and I will just say display flex and justify content to be center and also keep align items to be center, right? So my container will be right in the middle of my website. So if you can see here, okay, so it's not working. Let's see. So display, okay, item center, I think it should work. Yeah, so the element is right in the center of my website, right? Now what I'm going to do is I have this another class called child as well. So for child I will give it a specific height of like 300 pixel. I will also give it width of 300 pixel and I will give it a background color of gold like this. If I refresh this, you can see here we have the child which is inside the container. I'm going to decrease the height and width at least for now. So I'll just say 100 and 100 will be perfect for my example that I'm going to show you. If I refresh this, you can see here the container contains the child, right? Now let's try like positioning the element. So if I want to position the child right here, then how can we do it? So there is this thing called position absolute. So position and absolute like this. So if I give position absolute to a child element, let's see what happens. If I refresh this, you can see here it sticks right in here, the default position, top 0 and left also 0, exactly 0, right? But let's see if I give top like 30 pixel like this, go out here and refresh it, you can see here it get 30 pixel from the top, right? I can similarly give 40%, and you can see here it goes to the from the 40% of the parent element, right? Similarly I can give left like 30%, and it will give it will be like 30% from the left, right? Okay, so the 30% from the left is not actually working. Let me tell you what the reason behind it. Like if you can see here, if I just say like 70% or let's say 10% from the left and refresh this, you can see here it goes outside of the container, right? It's because the container was the parent element and the child was obviously the child element of the container, but giving left 10% actually brought it outside of the container, and that's what position absolute element does, right? So if you give a position absolute to any child, now it is independent of its position anyway. Let me tell you what I mean by that. So since we give position absolute to the child, now it doesn't care about its original position or what its parents is or where it should be. Now it's a free floating kind of like you can imagine like a water drop right over a leaf, right? So if you have a leaf and if there is a water drop inside it, and if you can move it, then the water drop can move wherever it wants. So it's just like that. So giving position element as absolute, it's just like a water drop that is inside a leaf, which means that now it can freely float anywhere it wants. It doesn't care about its original position. It can move anywhere it wants, right? But also we can actually if you can see here, so this is our container, which is our parent element. This was our child element. What if we always want it to be float inside the parent element, right? Because now the hello, which is a child element, is outside of the container. But what if we want to free float, but we only want to move it or let it allow it to flow just inside of the parent container? So what can we do to prevent it to go outside of this parent container? For that we have to give position relative to the parent or whichever the element you want to contain it inside, right? So if I just say position element to the container, then if I refresh this, you can hear it comes in, it just bring this child element inside the container, right? Because now it has to be inside the container because now the child is actually relative to its parents. So it has a position absolute, which means now it can easily free float. But since it is left 10 and top 40, so now the left 10 and top 40 is actually relative relative to the parent, right? Or relative to any element which is given position relative. So this is absolute element relative to this child is you can say the child is an absolute element, but it is absolute on relative to the container because we have given position relative to the container. So let's not make it any confusing. Let's make it really simple for you. If you don't give position relative to any of the element, and if you just keep position absolute, then it will automatically be position relative to the body, right? Because now it can easily free float. You can see here, now the left means left from the whole body, right? But if I give position relative to the container right here, now the left 30% means 30% from the container, right? So that's what position relative is and position absolute is. So you have to give a position relative to the element if you want to contain it or allow the absolute element to free float inside a particular element. So if you have a parent element and you want a child element, that has to be position absolute, and you want to move it around the parent element or become contained inside a parent element, then you have to give position relative to the parent element. And it also doesn't mean that I cannot bring this element outside of the container, right, I can give left minus 10% obviously, and refresh this. It still come out of the parent container, but you get the idea. So if you give position relative to particular element and position absolute to particular element, then the position absolute is actually relative to the element that you have given position relative to, and that's the idea behind position absolute and position relative is, right. And basically position absolute brings the element outside of its actual position, and now you can easily free float anywhere it wants in our web. So that's position absolute. Now let's start with another positioning element, and I'm going to say position. So but before that, let's give some height to our body. Let's say I want to give 150 pH. First I have to give height, so I will just say height will be 150 pH like this. And I also want to give background color to my body. I'll just say background color, let's say blue like this, and let's refresh this. You can see here now this is the whole body, right? And you can see here this is the container. The container is absolutely in the middle of the body, right here from the top and bottom is absolutely perfectly in the middle, because obviously justify container line item center that we have given to it. And you can see here this position absolute is actually absolute with relative to its parent, which is container, right, because we have given position relative to the container. So that's why it is absolute, and from left minus 10 with respect to this container, because this container contains position relative. Now let's see what position fixed does. If you can see here, the position of hello is exactly right here, right? And if I scroll it, the position is still the same. The position doesn't change. But what if I just change this to position fixed? So I just say position fixed like this and refresh it, then it disappears. So let's bring it to life. So instead of left minus 10, I'm going to say left just 10 for now, because obviously it's been overflow and it's been hidden, I think. So if it's left 10, then you can see here it brings the element right here. And that's the reason behind that is because position fixed is always with respect to the body or the main website. So if I've given here position relative, it really doesn't change anything for fixed element, because fixed is based on viewport, which means it really doesn't matter. You cannot keep position fixed with relative to certain other element. It always will be with relative to the body, and that's why the element is right here, right? So let's go back for reference. So you can see here, when I give position absolute and give left minus 1, then it is minus 1 from this container, right? Because the container has position relative. That's why it was right here from minus 10 with respect to the container which contains position relative. But if I change this to fixed, then minus 10 will actually let the element to hide, because now it is not relative to this container. Position fixed is always relative to the body, and that's why it's been hidden. And if I just say instead of minus 10 to 10, then the element will be brought back from 10 pixel from the body. And even though we have given position related to the container, it really doesn't matter, because position fixed is always related to the body of our website, right? It is always with respect to the body rather than any other element, and that's what position fixed is about. And other than that, let's say you can see here, let's go back again. So I'll just say position absolute and relative, and left I would just say 10, which will bring element right here inside the container, because obviously container contain position relative and we have position absolute here. So if I refresh this, it is right here, right? Now let me remove position relative from here, and if I refresh this, now it is position absolute with respect to the body, because we have not given position relative to any other element, right? So it is right here. Now if I scroll it, you can see here it's moving with the scroll, right? So if I scroll it, it's going top and bottom like this. But if I, instead of absolute, if I get position fixed, like this and go and refresh it, you can see here the scroll has no effect on position fixed element. And there's another difference between position absolute and position fixed. Position absolute element get affected by the scroll event of our browser, but you can see here position fixed means it is fixed, so the scroll event will not change its position because it is so fixed, right? And it is always fixed with respect to the viewport or the body rather than other element. Now another positioning is position sticky, and position sticky is actually the combination of position absolute and position fixed. Let me show you. Instead of position fixed, let's keep position sticky like this. Now unlike position fixed, position sticky is always relative to its parent, right? So if I refresh this, you can see here the scroll event is not taking any impact on our site. Let me increase the size of my viewport as well. I'll just keep it 350 px and refresh this like this. You can see here the scroll event is working perfectly fine. So it is absolute, it is just like absolute, which means it will be with reference to its parent. So it's kind of like absolute. It is also fixed because the scroll event is not changing its position, right? So even we are scrolling, the position of that element is exactly where it should be. But the thing is, like, it is absolute and it is also fixed, but you can see here it is fixed up until the end of the container, because once the container goes out of the viewport, then it start to behave as an absolute element, right? So when it is inside here, it is behaving as a fixed element when on scroll, right? Because it is not changing its position. It is right on the center, right? Right in the center, wherever we are putting it, it is still there even we are scrolling it, right? But once we are at the end of the container, once the scroll is getting to the closer to the end of the container, and we are now at the end, and now it is being taken away from the viewport instead of being fixed element, right? And that's the thing about sticky element is always related to its parents. That's the first thing. Just like absolute, it is related to the parent. Another is, just like fixed, it is not affected by the scroll, it is fixed right there, right? So what's the catch? So what's the difference? And the difference is that it is only fixed until the end of container or end of its parent, right? Once the parent is out of the viewport, then that fixed element, then that sticky element, or we can say fixed element or a sticky element, this is a sticky element. So yeah, so that particular sticky element will also start to get out of the viewport. So it is like absolute because it is relative to its parent. It is like fixed because it is not getting affected by the scroll of my website, right? My scroll of my browser. But it is but the difference is, the main difference is, it is only fixed until the viewport contain our parent container. So once the viewport or the scroll is going to take away our parent container, so after we reach the end of the parent container, then it also becomes like an absolute element and it is getting taken away from our viewport. So those were our positioning. So that we have 3 positioning element. Let me just get it done here. I'm getting something. All right. So there are 3 positioning elements. So the first is absolute, second is fixed, third is sticky. So absolute element always relative to the parent. It can be relative to the body as well if you don't give a relative to any other parent container. Second is, if it's absolute element, it get affected by the scroll event, which means the scroll can take it away and out of viewport. So position fixed is always with respect to the main website or the body, and it is not affected by the scroll. And third is position sticky, which is the mixture of both position absolute and fixed, which means it, like absolute, it is with respect to its parent container. Like fixed, it is not affected by the scroll, but it is not only affected by the scroll up until its parent container reaches the end, right? Once the parent container that contains the sticky element begin to comes to the end of our website or of our viewport, and it begins to go away from our viewport with the scroll event, then after that particular sticky element start behaving like an absolute element, and it will also go outside of it, right? But until it is inside our viewport, the sticky element will act like a fixed element but with relative to its parent container only. So that's the catch. I think you understood what I was trying to say. I mean, of course, this can be a little bit confusing, but you can also try it out and yourself and just figure out the difference to yourself. So that's positioning in a web. I hope you like it. And if you do like it, then please hit like and subscribe so that the people who want to learn this can actually find the video and maybe get something out of it too. Cheers, have fun, good night.